This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
The shutdown is over, but the ICE funding debate isn't. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Webster. Following hours of Capitol Hill sniping and wrangling, President Trump yesterday signed a bill that provides over $1 trillion in government funding, but not for Homeland Security.
Trump's ICE and Border Patrol interior operations are out of control.
That's California Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu. DHS will operate on a 2-week stopgap bill while lawmakers negotiate reforms to ICE operations. In the Oval Office, as President Trump signed those budget bills, South Carolina Republican Lindsey Graham had praise and criticism for Democrats.
They do have some good ideas, I think, but I've got a better idea in sanctuary cities. On immigration, I know what I'm talking about. I've got the scars to prove it.
Meantime, Borders Czar Tom Homan says 700 agents are being drawn down immediately in Minnesota. That's a fact he credits to better cooperation from Minnesota officials.
We currently have an unprecedented number of counties communicating with us now and allowing ICE to take custody of illegal aliens before they hit the streets. Unprecedented cooperation.
Despite ongoing protests, Homan says he's not leaving Minnesota until, quote, the job is done. The heated situation between the U.S. and Iran got hotter yesterday.
An F-35 stealth fighter jet shot down the hostile Iranian Shahed drone in the Arabian Sea. A dramatic escalation amid soaring tensions between the two countries.
CBS's Charlie Daggett. In a second clash, Iranian boats threatened to board a U.S.-flagged oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz before being chased off. All this as President Trump says U.S.-Iran talks are actually underway.
I had a chance to do something a while ago and it didn't work out, and we did Midnight Hammer. I don't think they want that happening again, but they would like to negotiate. We are negotiating with them right now.
Kirk Lippold, former commander of the USS Cole, tells Fox News he thinks he knows why Iran would take provocative action along with these talks.
The Iranians are trying to project power into the Arabian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz to demonstrate they have the ability to interdict and interfere with the supply of the world's oil coming from the Middle East. They're using it as a negotiating tactic.
Trump has threatened U.S. military action over the Iranian regime's slaughter of thousands of anti-government protesters. The authenticity of a ransom note delivered to a TV station, the focus of the investigation now into the suspected abduction of the mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie went missing Sunday from her Tucson home. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos isn't giving out a lot of details about the investigation.
It's like any piece of evidence. You give it to us. You give us a lead. We're going to look at every aspect of that lead and work it as a lead.
Reports say that ransom note demanded millions in cryptocurrency and contained details about the abduction not publicly known. Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos says the streaming giant has no political agenda of any kind.
Our goal is to win the moment of truth. That's when Americans sit in their couch, pick up their remote control, and decide what to watch. That's where we compete.
Sarandos on Capitol Hill Tuesday to testify before a Senate subcommittee ahead of the company's impending $72 billion acquisition of Warner Brothers and HBO, which has raised some antitrust concerns. Next to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro taking the wraps off his $53 billion budget yesterday, promising lower energy bills, more affordable housing, more jobs, and a cell phone ban in schools statewide. He also addressed the elephant in the room. How soon can lawmakers get a deal done? Last time around, the budget was 135 days late.
We all recognize it took too long last year, and that had real impacts on Pennsylvanians. But we learned some valuable lessons through that process. We learned that we all need to be at the table, and that we all need to be at the table sooner.
Mindful of that deadline, the governor has invited top lawmakers to start hashing out the details today.
When we all sat together, majority and minority, we made real progress. In that spirit, I've invited the leaders of all 4 caucuses to my office to begin this process in earnest. And I appreciate the fact that they've all accepted this invitation.
Republican Representative Clint Owlett says the process, however, should have already started.
One of the things that we would have liked to have seen happen was even getting in a room and having a conversation even before today. I think that would have been nice. That would have been helpful because I think we could have maybe actually put a realistic budget on the table instead of starting so far out and then having to come back. It just takes so long.
Owlett says restrictions on AI and cell phone bans in classrooms are good policy, but some of the larger parts of Shapiro's wish list are just that, wishful thinking.
There are some pieces that I am very concerned about. I think there's a number of things that he talked about that just really growing government and making government so much bigger than it is. And if you really close your eyes and listen, you'd think, there's nothing that government can't fix. That's kind of the takeaway for me. This is his big speech. It's his show. It's his opportunity to put his vision forward. And there are some things that are good, but it's just the beginning of the process, and we'll dig in from here.
We'll have more on Shapiro's budget plan and reaction later in this newscast. At Washington, D.C.'s Museum of the Bible this morning, a national gathering for prayer and repentance.
Your word promises us, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sins and will heal their land.
Senator Ted Cruz among the lawmakers and evangelical leaders speaking at the event, which organizers say was intended to mark the nation's 250th birthday and seek the God who gave America purpose. Well, get used to hearing this tune a lot this month. Some events of the 2026 Winter Olympics getting a head start today. The opening ceremony is in Milan, Italy, not until Friday, but the first events at the Milano Cortino Games get underway today. That includes alpine ski, luge training, and curling. And a pretty penny at the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show.
The best in show at the 150th Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show is the Doberman Pinscher.
That's 4-year-old Penny, the first Doberman to win Best in Show there since 1989. The runner-up at Madison Square Garden was a fan favorite, a Chesapeake Bay Retriever named Coda. A Retriever has never been top dog at Westminster. Still to come on the Noon Report, a recap of some of our top local stories and this week's Real Answers.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams calling for brisk and cold conditions today, and tomorrow we'll have some sun and some flurries. The weekend is a different story. It looks bone-chillingly cold. We'll have forecast details up in 10.
All right, Kevin, thank you. The roller coaster ride continues. Now checking the stories making news where you live in New York and Pennsylvania. We begin with a fatal fire in Bradford, Pennsylvania. Happened yesterday. Fire investigators say a 2-year-old boy died in a house fire on Jackson Avenue in the city. Initial indications are that it was an accidental fire. The home was already fully involved when first responders arrived. A special election yesterday for New York's 61st State Senate District. Democrat Jeremy Zellner handily defeated Republican Dan Gagliardo 60% to 40% in a heavily Democratic district. Zellner telling supporters,
"We're going to go fight for the people of this district, for more affordable housing, for a health care system that's both accessible and affordable, for union jobs and benefits that have long given people like my dad and grandfather an entry point to the middle class."
Gagliardo tells WGRZ a month just wasn't long enough to make up enough ground.
We're coming in a place where we are 2-1. We have to try to take some of their votes away. 30 days is a very difficult time frame to do that in.
Zellner replaces Sean Ryan, who left that office to become mayor of Buffalo. The seat comes open again in November, and Democratic State Assemblyman John Rivera says he plans to face Zellner in a June primary. Now back to that PA budget. Governor Josh Shapiro's hour-long budget speech Tuesday had just one single sentence when it came to legalizing recreational marijuana in the Keystone State. In fact, if you didn't pay attention, you might have missed it.
What this budget does do is finally regulate and tax skill games and pass comprehensive cannabis reform in Pennsylvania.
Representative Clint Owlett says, don't be deceived. Shapiro may be using different wording, but has a very solid plan to go ahead and legalize recreational marijuana this year.
The one thing that I did find odd was how he changed it to cannabis reform. I'm calling it weed reform. That's a new phrase that we're going to have to keep an eye on. It's not normally phrased that way. They're definitely approaching it differently this time around.
The governor's calling for AI restrictions to protect kids and teens, more cash for daycare providers, and lower energy bills. In his $53 billion spending plan, he's getting together with heads of all 4 chambers today to try to get working on a deal since last year's budget was months late. Energy experts warn you to brace yourself not just for another blast of cold coming this weekend, but for your utility bill when it arrives.
Yeah, those cold temperatures will lead to an increase in your bill. So says NOCO President Michael Casciano.
You can expect over the next 2 or 3 months much higher utility bills, all tracing back to this very long period of very cold temperatures.
He told WBEN there's extra strain on the system because the past few storms haven't just hit New York and Pennsylvania. They've slammed 30 to 40 states at once, all on the same power grid.
The entire country is using more natural gas than it normally would. So it is a supply and demand issue. There simply is not enough natural gas to meet the demands.
Casciano says your bill could be 10 to 20% higher, depending on how well your home is insulated because of how long we've had cold weather. Sarah Harnish, Family Life News.
All right, thank you, Sarah. No to new electric school buses. For the second time in a year, that's what Spencerport parents have told the school district, rejecting a proposition to borrow money to add a pair of battery-powered buses to the fleet. Last night's vote wasn't even close, 743 to 289. These no voters told WROC.
When it comes to this with the buses, there's not enough data.
It's very cold here in the winter, and I don't think electric buses are going to start, run, anything else.
In light of everything and total costs and so forth, I really don't think it's worth it.
New York State has mandated all districts transition to electric buses by 2035. A week after a major snowstorm blanketed Pennsylvania, the cleanup is still ongoing in many areas as municipalities work at getting all of that snow cleared out of the way. Johnstown Public Works Director Carmen Trusello tells WJAC all his crews can do is keep plugging away.
It's going to be a little bit of time to get all that snow removed because there is a lot. Then we have some on the bridges that we have to remove. We're going over for a second pass with snow blowers and blowing it off into the curb there to open up a wider path.
Other municipalities say it's going to take some time to get all of that snow removed from street parking spaces and other secondary spots. One of the corrections officers who was acquitted in the Robert Brooks trial now is returning the legal fire. Nicholas Kiefer has filed a $5 million claim against the state for back pay and damages, alleging malicious prosecution, defamation, and breach of contract. Brooks was one of several COs accused in connection with the beating death of inmate Robert Brooks at the Marcy Correctional Facility. A bit of a shocker when it comes to the grocery stores shoppers like the most. According to the American Customer Satisfaction Index, Rochester-based Wegmans, long a leader when it comes to grocery store ratings, is no longer king of the hill. That distinction now belongs to Trader Joe's, at least in this latest ACSI rating. In fact, Wegmans slipped to 4th place on that list, edged out by Sam's Club and Aldi. University of Buffalo Assistant Finance Professor Scott Lang tells WGRZ he's not all that surprised, though.
It kind of makes sense when you think about it as to why Trader Joe's and Aldi have really shot up in the rankings. These are store chains that really value what customers are showing they care about now in 2026 and in this climate. And customers care more about value proposition. They want to go further with their money than they do in traditional supermarkets.
Among the issues surveyed customers expressed about Wegmans were store layout, staff courtesy, and checkout speed. A brief fire scare inside of a residence hall on the SUNY Oswego campus. Oswego firefighters say a mattress caught fire in a dorm room. Police used a fire extinguisher to put it out. Investigators say a portable battery unit charging on top of the bed malfunctioned and ignited the mattress. No injuries reported, but firefighters say it's a good reminder to not charge electronics on top of a flammable surface, especially a mattress. And the Pennsylvania Soldiers and Sailors Home in Erie held a ceremony yesterday commemorating a lesser-known act of World War II heroism. February 3rd is 4 Chaplains Day. It marks the sacrifice of 4 U.S. Army chaplains who gave up their life jackets to soldiers as the troop carrier Dorchester sank in 1943 after being torpedoed by a German submarine. Ken Vibriel with the Home tells Jet TV.
I think it means a lot to be able to tell this piece of history. It's not one that's really talked about much in history books, and for us to stop and take a moment to tell this story, to tell this history, to commemorate with the community and with our veterans here at the home really is a special occasion.
During the ceremony, 4 life jackets were displayed as biographies of those selfless chaplains were read aloud. The chaplains were among 672 men who perished in the sinking of the Dorchester. Well, close, but not quite close enough for the Buffalo Sabres last night. Here's Randy with sports.
Good
afternoon. I'm Randy Snavely. Mark, with just 14 seconds left in overtime, Jake Gunsel scored the winning goal for Tampa Bay, giving them a 4-3 victory over the Buffalo Sabres. That followed Darren Radish's goal with 26 seconds left in regulation that sent the contest into the overtime period. Matthias Samuelsson scored twice for Buffalo, Josh Doan once. Bo Horvat scored his second goal of the game 52 seconds into the OT to give the Islanders a 5-4 win over the Penguins. Matthew Barzal had a goal and 2 assists for New York. The Flyers snapped their 4-game losing streak with a 4-2 victory over Washington. Jamie Drysdale, Owen Tippett, Carl Grundstrom, and Rasmus Ristolainen all scored for Philly. Also skating to victories, the Blue Jackets, Canes, Maple Leafs, and Ducks. Some big trades went down in the NBA yesterday as James Harden was dealt to the Cavs and Darius Garland is now a Clipper. The Celtics have acquired Nikola Vucevic in a trade with Chicago. The Bulls are getting Anthony Simons and a second-round draft pick. Action on the court saw the Knicks win their 7th straight, 132-101. Mikal Bridges had 23 points, Jalen Brunson 21, and Karl Anthony Towns had 19 points and grabbed 14 rebounds. The win costly, though. Josh Hart left the game with a sprained ankle. 76ers knocked off the Warriors 113-94. That's their 4th straight victory. Detroit, Utah, the Lakers, Hawks, Celtics, Bucks, Thunder, and Suns, your other winners. And finally this, the Winter Olympics begin today. Wait, what? Yeah, the opening ceremonies are on Friday, but competition actually starts today. Curling, women's prelim hockey, and ski jumping are all on the docket. That is a look at sports.
All right, thank you, Randy. Still to come here on the Noon Report, this week's edition of Real Answers and the story of a teacher who's seen a lot, and we mean a lot.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. In 1988, Chuck Colson honored Benigno Aquino Jr., a Filipino opposition leader who stood firmly against dictator Ferdinand Marcos, with the very first Wilberforce Award. Aquino was assassinated for calling for a free Philippines. At that inaugural ceremony, Colson described him as embodying faith in action like the award's namesake, the abolitionist William Wilberforce. Since that very first year, the Colson Center has stewarded the Wilberforce Award, honoring dozens of other recipients who have also made a lasting difference in various spheres of influence. This year, Os Guinness will be recognized as the winner of the 2026 Wilberforce Award at a ceremony that will be held at this year's Colson Center National Conference in Knoxville, Tennessee. The great-great-great-grandson of Dublin brewer Arthur Guinness, Oz was born in China during the Second World War, where his parents were medical missionaries. The first decade of his life was a time of national and global upheaval, war, the rise of communism, a famine that took the lives of his 2 brothers. Expelled with other foreigners in 1951, Oz returned to Europe. Eventually, he would earn a Doctor of Philosophy at Oxford University before sharpening both his faith and worldview at L'Abri, Francis Schaeffer's home in the Swiss Alps. In the decades since, Oz has committed his life to addressing the essential issues that face humanity and society, all from a Christian worldview. In 1991, he founded the Trinity Forum, an institution dedicated to the cultivation of the Christian mind. An ardent defender of religious freedom and the rights of conscience, Oz was a key drafter of the 1988 Williamsburg Charter, a celebration and reaffirmation of the First Amendment, as well as the Global Charter of Conscience in 2012, which was presented to the European Union Parliament. In Truth Rising, a documentary produced by the Colson Center and Focus on the Family, Oz argues that this current moment that God has placed us in is what should be called a civilizational moment. Here's what he had to say.
A civilizational moment is a period of crisis when a civilization, our civilization, completely loses touch with the inspiration that made it what it is. In other words, our foundational inspiration, our original dynamism is gone. We've lost it. It is at this point, like all the other civilizations that have come and gone before us, that we face 3 clear options. renew the original inspiration, replace it, or decline?
What is needed in this civilizational moment, according to Os Guinness, is gospel people with a backbone of steel. That's what he says in his book, Impossible People. In other words, we have to be immovable, no matter how far and wide those around us are being swept away into a cultural drift. And that means, as Oz has also argued in his best-selling book, The Call, Finding and Fulfilling the Central Purpose of Your Life, that we must all fully reckon with the seriousness of this hour in which we live. Only then can we work for the glory and the approval of what he calls an audience of one. Learn more about Os Guinness and his story in the Truth Rising documentary, or pick up any one of his many books, or join us for the 2026 Colson Center National Conference in May, where Oz will be speaking and will also be presented with the 2026 Wilberforce Award. You can learn more about the conference at colsonconference.org and learn more about the Wilberforce Award by going to colsoncenter.org/award. That's colsoncenter.org/award. For Breakpoint, I'm John Stone Street.
All right, thank you, sir. Now let's check weather with Kevin.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast for this afternoon. A mix of clouds and sunshine across a good portion of Pennsylvania. More in the way of clouds in New York and near the Great Lakes, with flurries, a little lake effect snow southeast of Lake Ontario. High temperatures upper teens and 20s. Tonight and tomorrow, partly cloudy skies, a flurry or two. Low temps tonight, single digits. High temps tomorrow in the 20s.
All right, thank you very much, Kevin Williams. I'm Mark Webster. Thanks again for joining us. You're listening to the Noon Report on Family Life. Grown kids disconnecting from their parents. Welcome back to another edition of Real Answers, a regular Wednesday feature during the Family Life Noon Report. It's when we discuss the issues that matter to families with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. Welcome back, Chris.
Good to be back, Mark.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
What we've got here is a failure to communicate. That famed line from the movie Cool Hand Luke has stayed popular as a meme because despite living in an era where it's ridiculously easy to stay in touch, sometimes, Chris, that isn't even enough to keep lines of communication open.
That's for sure. And my clients in my office all the time, we talk about how connected we are electronically, but how poorly connected we are interpersonally, in person, face to face. We're talking about a special version of that, if you will, when we talk about adult children going off and getting married. And what happens to that relationship with their parents?
There's some scripture out there that seems to more or less tell newlyweds to kind of go off and become their new family unit, but it doesn't say sever all ties with your parents in the process.
Not one bit. And as a matter of fact, that can be a very traumatic experience for parents, when their kids go off and get married, particularly parents that have had very close relationships with their children and adult children. And it might not necessarily mean that the children are forgetting about their parents intentionally. I'm not talking necessarily intentional here. But what are some things that parents, as well as the adult children that are going off to get married or otherwise leaving the house, what are some things that both parties need to remember?
Yeah, it changes things too, doesn't it? The relationship between parent and child is one thing when the kids are kids, but when they're adults and off on their own, the dynamic changes and there's adjustments on both sides.
Absolutely. And we oftentimes talk about that empty nest syndrome when children go off to college and leave the home, but there's a kind of like a secondary version of this again, and this is when adult children, even if they've been out of the house for a while or have otherwise grown up and are out on their own a bit, when they get married, and now there's a shift also in the relationship itself, not necessarily just maybe some geography, but in the relationship. I guess you could call it empty nest syndrome part 2.
That's one good way to put it. I'm a father of a couple of adult kids, though they're not married yet, but I still know firsthand the pain of children not making time to at least stay in touch, and you can argue about how much is enough and whether texts and calls are enough, but the bottom line is just keeping the lines of communication open.
And absolutely, and again, this is not a cookie-cutter approach by any stretch of the imagination, because we know that people have different levels of and different qualities of relationship with their parents, but it is something that really needs to be addressed, and the Bible does make it clear, of course, we are to go off to leave our families to cleave to our spouse and to then form a life of our own. However, just ask the question point blank, what does a healthy adult child and parent relationship look like after a marriage has occurred with the child to their spouse? There's some really important things to remember here. For example, parents and children that, let's say they've engaged in activities for a very long time together, whether it's something as basic as Sundays in front of the television watching, all right, we got to think here. Buffalo Bills and Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, to throw in the Philadelphia Eagles there too.
Yeah.
All right, even a sliver of Eastern Ohio with the Cleveland Browns. But the reality is, Sunday afternoons watching football with dad, or let's say doing outdoor activities, father and son, or mothers and daughters engaging in activities together. Those can be so impacting and so meaningful to the parent that when that is suddenly just disconnected, that's actually a huge loss that can present grief, actually, to either one of the parties or sometimes both. Obviously, we're not talking about necessarily children doing this on purpose, but when that sudden cessation of those activities stops, it can be very difficult for the parent. There are also complicating factors that can come into it. For example, if let's say there's a loss. Let's say one of the parents passes away. That's very difficult for the remaining parent. And then let's say also you bring in something else, such as the marriage, again, of the adult child. We'll call it a double shock to the system, to the parent, because now they not only have to deal with the loss of their spouse, they also have to deal with their child getting married. That's a lot of stress and pressure on the parent. And again, we're not necessarily saying that children are doing this intentionally, but these are factors that children and the parents have to keep in mind, that these life transitions, these life transitions can carry a lot of stress with them, and there's better ways of dealing with it.
You're listening to Real Answers. I'm Mark Webster, along with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson, talking about the communication line staying open between grown kids and their parents. And there's just as much importance for this, really, for those adult kids, too, because those parents have a lot of valuable experience to pass on.
And we should also say, Mark, that it's not just communication lines. We should call it engagement opportunities. I think everybody realizes that when a marriage of an adult child takes place, of course things are going to change. And let's say the frequency of these activities and these connections and relationship activities between the parent and the adult child, of course that's not going to happen as often. However, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be acknowledged and that efforts shouldn't be made by the adult children to still try to, as much as they can, engage their parents in some of those activities, even if it's on a lesser frequent schedule, to still maintain some of that, because those are healthy connection points, those are healthy relationship points that helps keep the adult child and the parent connected, even if it is going to look different. And of course it's going to look different, but it still needs to happen, because those are the things that are ultimately going to maintain a healthy adult child parent relationship moving forward. And quite honestly, there is really a lot of time in our schedules to make these important relationships happen. So it does require some effort, it does require mindfulness. And when I say mindfulness, I'm saying I can't forget this. My parents are very important. I have to be able to engage them occasionally, but not forget about the parents, because they are going through, like I said before, they're going through empty nest syndrome part 2.
Yeah, fair enough. And I guess parents, once they're in that situation, have to be mindful also of the situation that those young newlyweds and or maybe young parents are, where their schedule is just crazy, kids in diapers, and while they've got more time on their hands, they've got to be mindful of what it used to be like.
Absolutely. And again, that's where that communication comes in. But when you start off with a foundation from both parties, from the adult child as well as the parent, saying, okay, we want to maintain our relationship. What's it going to look like going forward, and how can we do this without putting excessive burden or unfair expectations on either party? So that communication is very important, and I just really like to see parents and their adult children communicating and still making that time for each other, even if it's in a different format or different amount of time that's spent. The reality is we just got to understand that this is difficult on the parents. And again, if there's complicating factors, if there's other things that have complicated this life transition, then you got to deal with it. And if you're having a hard time, it's okay to seek help from a pastor, a trusted friend, or a counselor to help you work through this and come up with a plan to help restore communication or even restore relationship patterns with your adult child who's moved out of the house or otherwise gotten married and moving on. These are transitions that can be worked through successfully, but you got to work through it mindfully.
Good advice. You've been listening to Real Answers, a Wednesday feature of the Family Life Noon Report, where we discuss the issues important to families with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. Thanks again, Chris.
Always my pleasure, Mark. Thank you.
Real Answers airs Wednesdays during the Noon Report or online anytime at Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or FamilyLife.org. Just ahead, a teacher with a lesson in longevity after Weather with Kevin.
Good Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. A brisk and cold weather pattern will carry us through the next couple days and nights, and we'll have some scattered flurries near the lakes. As we head toward the weekend, an Arctic front will slice through the region Friday night with a snow squall, and behind it, another atrociously cold weekend is lurking. Our call for this afternoon, a mix of clouds and sunshine across a good portion of Pennsylvania. More in the way of clouds in New York and near the Great Lakes with flurries, a little lake effect snow southeast of Lake Ontario. High temperatures, upper teens and 20s. Tonight and tomorrow, partly cloudy skies, a flurry or two. Low temps tonight, single digits. High temps tomorrow in the 20s. Friday, becoming cloudy with flurries returning. High temps, 20s near 30. Watch for a snow squall Friday night late, and then a frigid weekend will follow.
All right, Kevin, still waiting for that big thaw one of these days. Finally at noon, meet Detroit Country Day School English teacher Beverly Hannett Price, a passion she's been sharing with students there now for 67 years. Safe to say she loves her job.
I love the school. I love teaching. I love the life of the energy that youth have.
And her fellow teachers love her too, telling WXYZ.
Every time we go out, we meet someone that she's impacted.
Everybody in this school loves her, knows her, has appreciated the lessons that she's taught them.
And what's the teacher's biggest lesson of all?
Be kind. You be the best version of yourself you can possibly be, because there will never be another you.
And there may never be another Beverly Hannett Price. She taught her first English class there in 1958 and has no plans to retire. She's 90 years young. And that's the world we live in for Wednesday, February 4th, 2026. As always, we thank you for listening. I'm Mark Webster, Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.